Yeah, I know, but
I mean, I'm
is this
sure
a, I
it's
mean, it's the Elite Eight versus Sweet 16. Either that should be a thing throughout
it
or
it
it's,
was the way it was that way the entire time I've been trying to check
oh,
throughout the
really?
tournament.
Okay, then I
Yeah.
guess I've just been lucky enough that
Maybe
uh,
if you check after a certain time, then it
I
goes
haven't
live.
had to, right. I haven't had to go to it that early. Let's see.
All right.
Oh, there we go. Box score on the Auburn site.
Great.
Okay. We'll
All
see
right.
if
So
we,
we are
yeah.
live
Oh,
here,
oh,
guys.
it's nothing. It's got nothing in it. Is
Yeah,
that what
that's
you were saying?
yeah, that's what it's okay. That's the only thing that I don't really have. All right. All right, folks, we're gonna get going here in just a
Joke.
second. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, live after Michigan State's loss to one seed Auburn in the Elite Eight, 70 to 64. The game was decided early as Broome and the Tigers went to work, blitzed the Spartans with an early 17-0 run. It was 8 to 6 that time, with the only lead Michigan State had. And then that was early in the first half. And then from there, they sort of just maintained that lead. Solid defense, solid offense, and the play of Broome, of course. There was a brief moment of hope, I think, for Michigan State when Johni Broome left the game. Looked like an ankle and maybe even an elbow injury. Went to the locker room. Auburn was up 10 with about 10 minutes to go. He came back, and the Spartans were unable to make up any ground. They were still down 10 when he returned to the game. And from there, Auburn just did enough to prevent Michigan State from catching them. So Michigan State ends the season 30-7, 17-3 in the Big Ten. Big Ten champions. Certainly disappointing end, as it always is when especially the season comes to an end like this in the NCAA tournament, which it almost always does, except for one team. But I think when we have a few days to reflect back, and we'll feel better about things. But right now, it's very tough.
Eh, I don't. I honestly, I'm disappointed that they lost. Obviously, I think we all wanted, maybe for this team in particular, I really
Yeah.
wanted a Final Four, really wanted a national championship, but I really wanted a Final Four. But I'm not. I've felt worse in these types of games, and when I've felt worse, it's when I looked at it. The UConn game in 2014 is a classic example, and I thought Michigan State's better than these guys. This
Mm-hmm.
is this shouldn't have happened.
Right.
And there have been a couple others like that.
Texas Tech, maybe 2019,
Yeah,
kind of felt that way too.
The Butler Final Four in
Butler. Yep.
2010 for sure. Um, there have been examples of that. This isn't quite in UNC 2009
Right.
territory. Not even close, really. But that's a team that, if they're playing somewhere reasonably near their best, and I'm sure an Auburn fan would say, "Oh no, we've got a couple more gears we can go. We could shoot the three much better," and that's probably true. But there was a marked difference between the way Auburn played in this game and the way they played against Michigan, for example, where
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
30 minutes they were just pratfalling. And then they turned it on. They turned on the afterburners in the last 10 and won going away. This game, I felt they played an extremely steady 40 minutes. There
Exactly.
was never much of a lull. I agree with you that it felt like when Broome went out, that was a chance, and Michigan State was unable to get that done
Yeah.
in the 5 minutes or so he was out, which, by the way, and I don't know, obviously, none of us do, the nature of the injury. And I can't imagine they'd let him back on the court if there was any reason to be really, really concerned. But that did not look good. And I'm talking about that, and he still managed to make
His
a couple
arm.
plays.
Yeah.
Yeah,
His elbow.
his
Yeah.
elbow looked, I mean, when you're favoring it like that, he was basically playing one handed basketball.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. I understand Bruce Pearl is, like any coach, paranoid about what can happen. And boy, Michigan State almost put them under real game pressure at the
Yeah.
end. So I get it. But man, I don't think you can do that. he did not look good. But anyway, that was one point. There also was at least once, maybe twice in the second half where Michigan State got it down to 5
Yep.
with the ball
Mm-hmm.
and just you felt like they were one more make away from maybe turning the momentum enough. And they
Exactly. Yep.
just couldn't get it. The other thing I would say is, and this again, not to devalue Auburn's win, because generally speaking, you find that these kind of plays go the way of the winner. Lots, probably 4 or 5 totally broken plays that just ended up in their hands in the right spot to make a bucket. I mean, it happened repeatedly. It's a funny team. They didn't have nearly the amount of turnovers they did against Michigan, which was not surprising. We knew they wouldn't.
Yeah.
But you see that looseness still show up, and it's so strange given how great they are statistically in terms of valuing the ball. But in this game, the difference was on a lot of those plays, whereas against Michigan, they ended up in turnovers. In this game, it would just somehow find an Auburn player's hands. And,
Yeah.
as I say, usually that goes to the team that's a little quicker to the ball, a little more energy, a little tougher. And so I'm not devaluing what they did. They deserve the win, clear cut. But that was something that was also readily apparent. It's like, wow, you got every break.
Yeah.
They
Well,
really did.
I felt at times too. It Michigan State was not playing frenetically, but it was kind of on the verge of that, and I think Auburn just sped them up. Whether that's because of their athleticism, their size, just
Yeah,
certainly the situation during that run. That's what it really felt like to me. What happens is those plays you're just kind of you're just out of position. You're not where you normally are, and you just kind of just miss those plays. I mean, there were a couple that one drive where I think it was deflected twice and it just bounced to the next guy who's Cardwell. I think we had just got it.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
moments
But
like that. Yeah.
but that is, I think, because Michigan State was just kind of out of position too. But and also just the way the ball bounces.
A,
And to your
a
point,
little bit, yeah. But normally, I guess what I'm getting at is many, if not all of them that I'm thinking of, were situations where Michigan State actually made a play. Like somebody from Michigan State got their hands on the ball, right? They deflected it.
yeah,
They made a play. So it wasn't total, oh, they're in scramble mode the way you think of. Somebody made a play and it just happened to fall into the wrong guy's hands. So
right,
that was frustrating, but again, that usually goes to the team that's just a little quicker to the ball, a little more in sync, and that was Auburn today, and you saw the results. In speaking about the length, I think, my opinion, the length, their rim protection was vastly more impactful than their athleticism. I didn't think they out. I don't think they're a more athletic team than Michigan State. They might be even-ish, but I don't think
okay,
they're more athletic overall. I really don't. What they are is long in that post, especially. And we talked about it. They're the number 4 block rate team in the country. And they go hunting for blocks. And you saw that in this game. But the way that it went, and Auburn ended up with 5 blocks. So they were even with Michigan State, 5 apiece. But
yeah,
where I don't think it was even at all was the effect on shots that their length had. Michigan State probably had one of their worst games of the season. I'd have to see a shot chart to feel 100% confident in that, but let's
I
say
think
I'm
you're
about
right.
I'm about 80% confident that this was the worst game they had all year in terms of finishing at the rim.
Yep,
And to me that was entirely, I don't think it was all of a sudden those guys forgot how to hit layups or drives, half hooks, whatever it may be at the rim. I think it's that Auburn's length really got to them. And
yeah,
it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to get you off kilter and make those finishes tougher. And I think Auburn absolutely did that. Their interior defense was worth way more than 5 blocks. I mean, this isn't all layups, but it'll illustrate the point I'm making. Michigan State in this game from 2 15 for 41.
Yeah.
There's your ball game.
Yeah.
Uh, Only 16 free throw attempts. That's not terrible, but it's, I think I said in our pregame, got to get to 20 plus
Right.
to have a shot. Didn't do it. You know, that again, give them credit. Now, I've seen some people complaining about the way the game was officiated.
Uh,
I will say this. Broome had an unbelievable game. That's stating the obvious. I do think he gets away with swim moves in the post.
mm-hmm.
And he did it at least 3 times in this game. In my opinion, should have been offensive fouls. That said, I don't think officiating determined this game.
No, I agree.
I think
Yeah.
that
So
Michigan State was, we talked about shot blockers, you got to go through them, right? I didn't think Michigan State was going through them enough. They were, when they would get to the rim, they were bothered by that length. And instead of just saying, screw it, I'm going through you and we'll see if you can stop me, and relying on that to hopefully draw some calls, they tried to compensate by making sure they could get the shot off over the contest. Problem with that is you're then not getting the call because you're not requiring them to make
right.
contact,
Right.
and you're lowering your chances of hitting it because you're doing something that's out of your wheelhouse. And I think that was, to me, I mean, there were lots of things that went into this, but to me, that was probably the single biggest thing I thought, is that Auburn's length really prevented Michigan State from doing the things they needed to do to win
Yeah.
this game.
Yeah, no question. I mean, let's talk about, I think there was a couple of interesting developments in this game from Michigan State standpoint. The most obvious one, I think, is Jackson Kohler's game.
Yeah.
He really struggled defensively. He couldn't stop Broome. Broome was just too big and just backed him down. And we talked about, we kind of expect that to be the strategy for Michigan State, that they would give the two shots from Broome and then prevent the threes, which they did a pretty good job throughout most of the game. However, he just kept backing down to the point where he's shooting from 4 feet away, and it was just so far away at that point that you can't even dig down as the guards. They switched that strategy, did a better job, but that was kind of like, I don't blame Kohler so much for that. But from the offensive end, I think we saw some stuff from Kohler, which I think at least I certainly expected to see more from this early in this tournament. Definitely some post moves. He was probably better finishing from 2 than he's been all season in this game. And then, of course, the 3-pointers.
Considering the opposition, I would agree.
Yeah, and they were not easy ones, most of them. And
Right.
he was hitting all of them. He was on, and then hit his free throws, and then hit 3 or 4 from 3. I mean, we saw that was I think the game we kind of expected. Again, I expect to see the 3-point shots be more of a factor in the NCAA tournament. They really haven't been until just this game, which of course was a losing effort. But we've seen a progression of his game. And I'm very excited to see what he's like next year, because I think, much as we saw Joey Hauser at the end of was that a senior year, I guess, before the COVID year or whatever, and he sort of that last few, like, couple weeks or something, he just changed as sort of who he was, and then he came back that next year, his COVID year, and was fantastic, like, all year long. I almost wonder if we're like at that sort of inflection point for Jackson's career going into next season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I have 2 competing thoughts on the defensive end, because overall, I think Jackson Kohler had a pretty good year defensively. I had severe questions at different points of his career if he could guard 4s. Well, he's proven he can do that. I'm not saying he's a lockdown defender, but when your team goes 17-3, laps the field in the Big Ten, you get to an Elite Eight, that's enough evidence for me that it was at least not something that the average team was able to exploit. And that kind of tracks with your Joey Hauser comparison, because that's where Joey got to as a 5th-year player. Never a great defender, but he became a functional one. I actually think Jax might have been a shade better than functional overall this year. However, tonight, yeah, he had no shot against Broome. Now again, Broome got helped with a few no calls, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I have two thoughts. On the one hand, I think maybe the next step for Jax, and this might be part of it on the offensive end too. There's been so much effort put into his conditioning, into getting himself in better shape. We've seen him slim down, be more defined, and he's done a wonderful, clearly, it's obvious when you look at him what kind of job he's done. And the MSU strength and conditioning staff as well, but mostly it comes down to the player. Tremendous job. I wonder at least, maybe the goal for this offseason needs to be just adding a little bit more strength.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. On the other hand, I don't want to overreact to a guy having a tough night against one of the two best individual players in college basketball this season.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a bum he's going up against there. Yeah.
So, but I do think, and look, it's really easy for me to sit here and say, well, Jax just needs to keep getting stronger. That's a hard thing to do. And he's obviously put in a ton of work. So I'm not about to suggest I've got a better idea than anybody involved in that process, because I don't. But it did occur to me, like, you know, part of it, well, you mentioned, and you're right about this, part of the problem tonight was where Broome was catching the ball. And it's not because Jax doesn't know that or that Jax isn't trying. I just think he was up against a guy. Obviously, he's given up, 2 inches, 3 inches to
Yeah.
Broome. That hurts too. But he's also in Broome's, 31. I looked at their ages, by the way, that starting lineup 22, 22, 23, 24, 25. That's
Wow.
how old the Auburn starting lineup was today. If you think that doesn't matter, you didn't watch the same game I watched. But whatever, that's college basketball in
That's just it.
2025.
Right.
So, Tom Izzo's free to do that if he wants to, and he obviously doesn't. But physical maturity is what I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Johni Broome has a little more of that than Jackson Kohler. So it occurs to me, might a little more strength help in denying a guy like that to be able to get to his spots as easily and as frequently as he did. Maybe, but I will say this. When you look at the kid and you look at what Michigan State does, I have all the faith in the world that whatever improvements are there to make will get made. And
Mm-hmm.
Jackson Kohler overall, you'd have to say that was a really good day. I mean, 17-11 against that interior defense
Yeah.
is getting it done. He struggled defensively at times, absolutely. But, I didn't really see anybody else shutting Broome down either.
No,
So
and he's not the only one who struggled defensively for the Michigan
that's what
Spartans
I
either.
mean.
I mean, yeah. I
That's
mean,
what
not
I
even
mean.
just with Broome, just with everybody. I mean, just they had a lot of problems in different areas.
Well,
They kept splitting
I'm gonna
those.
I'm
They
gonna
kept
push back against that.
Well,
No, I'm
I
gonna
think they got so many slips with Broome. Now
with
that was of
Broome.
course Broome.
With Broome.
Yeah, but like off that screen, I mean, they did that a number of times where Pettiford he'd get clear lane to the basket as well a number
Yes.
of times as well. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying
That was something Izzo mentioned, that they were struggling with ball screen coverage on that stuff. And credit to Auburn for going to that middle
yeah,
screen and getting those slips. But I want to look at the numbers here just to make sure I got it right. So Auburn was 26 of 61 overall from the floor. Ex Broome, they were, what would it be, 48. 16 for 48, or 33%.
mm-hmm.
It's kind of what you need to do with the
Right.
other guys. And that's the thing. I mean, we'll talk more about it, but the game plan that Michigan State had was exactly the one I thought they would. Kind of load up, try to take away the perimeter, and you live with what you get with Broome going one-on-one,
Right.
largely. And it kind of worked. I mean, Auburn scored 70 points. That's a top 10 offense in the country. They didn't go crazy. They weren't super efficient. MSU limited the threes. Absolutely, they did. Just a little too much Johni Broome. And then I actually think, and I rarely say this, but the bigger problem was Michigan State on the offensive end.
Yeah,
That's where
I
they
agree.
lost this game. They were
Yep.
very, very inefficient inside the arc. They were inefficient outside the arc too until late, but inside the arc, they struggled in a way we just have not seen. That to me was the difference in the game. I didn't think Michigan State struggled defensively, really. I really don't. They struggled with Broome, but Broome also made plays. You got to give him credit for making plays. A lot of that stuff inside even. He was missing a lot of those shots against Michigan. Like he put up raw numbers that were very similar in the Michigan game, but he was way more efficient in this one.
Oh yeah, we'll go through
So
the
he,
numbers in a little bit,
yeah,
but
he
yeah,
finished
he
plays
was
in this game that he did not finish the same way against Michigan. And that's the gamble that you take. And we knew that going in. That all right, you're going to live with that. And Michigan State had to live with it. And in the end, they got a really, really nice game out of Broome, and that plus their defense was enough to get them across the finish line.
yeah.
But no, I don't think Michigan State played badly defensively in totality at all. I mean, Jesus, Baker Mazzara 2 for 10, Jones 2 for 6, Kelly 3 for 10, Caldwell was 2 for 3, Pettiford 4 for 12. I mean, those are those are numbers you'd take any day of the week against those guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many times did Michigan State have offensive rebounds, get good looks, whether it's from three or two, and just, unable to
Yeah.
convert on
Yes.
I I mean, they were usually those are looks that are really good, right? Like you kick out straight on someone and shooter's just off today. I mean, Aikens hit some late, but they were, sort of garbage time when it didn't really
It
matter when the
it
game was
boosted,
over.
yeah. The late makes made the 3 point shooting look better than it deserved to. They actually outshot Auburn from
Right. Yeah.
three.
30%. Yeah.
Yeah,
Versus 28. Yeah.
and it took a late close by Jaden to get there. Right.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. I think but again, that's another facet of what I'm talking about. I think this is a game where you look at the offensive end and you say that's where the problems were. Really struggled finishing twos, unable to hit good looks from three. You can't really complain about the quality of the look. As you say, a lot of them came off offensive rebounding activity, which is exactly what you want. And that was a difference between the two teams. I'd have to see the numbers to be certain of this, but boy, it sure felt to me like Auburn cashed in on second chances with threes specifically better
Yeah.
than Michigan State did.
They had a few more. They went 11-9, the second chance points. I finally looked it up, but
Okay. But
so
I would venture a guess that maybe 9 of the 11 they got were on threes. And I don't know that did Michigan State ever hit a three off an offensive rebound in this game?
I don't think so. I
It
mean,
wasn't couldn't have been often.
no.
And
Well,
that was a
that
separator.
goes without saying. Yeah.
That was a separator. And look, one of those things, right? Nobody pretends that this was a great 3 point shooting team. It was an improved one,
Mhm.
and you hoped for a better performance than they got today. Did not happen. And that's just another layer on the theme that today, at least, when you look at the totality of it, inefficiency at the rim, inability to hit open threes, and then really, I would say, not getting enough done in terms of activity to get yourself to the foul line. You add all that up, and it's just, I mean, look, the track record of the race to 69 is intact. Michigan
It
State
was,
did
yes.
win. I think they won 2 games this year where they didn't win that race, but every one of the losses, so they lost, what was it? Uh, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games, right?
Yep.
Every single one of them, either they never got to 69, like was the case today, or they just lost the race to it, which was also the case today. So what that tells us is the offense was just not quite good enough to
Yeah.
win this one.
All right. So move on to the player keeping the gutter. So I don't know what the weather's been like in Detroit, but it was over here in Grand
Bad.
Rapids. We had tornado warnings. We had Power went out partially. I know my daughter in East Lansing or Lansing, she lost her power briefly. Of course, and then of course, the nightmare scenario you get is you watch this game and they're going to have this, they're going to talk about the storm and stuff when you want to watch the game. Uh, Ironically, we had a pizza that was stuck in the oven, and then of course the oven turns off when we lost our power. Fortunately, came back on. Pizza was perfect. My wife's a miracle worker, so anyway, it was very good. But anyway, it is obviously that season. Lots of rain. Make sure your guys are working properly. I looked outside, and we have no problems besides sticks all over the place and from the trees. And I know because we have leaf guards on now, thanks to the Brothers Adjust Your Gutters. I don't have any sticks in my gutters, so I don't have to worry about that. So make sure you contact the Brothers Adjust Your Gutters. It is definitely that time of year when they can get out there, and they'll get out there in pretty lousy weather, whether it's cold, even if it's a little bit rainy, they'll be out there on the ladders and take care of all that stuff. So whether it's your house or your business, contact the brothers today. You'll be very glad you did. You get 10% off as a listener to the show if you go over to our support page. The Final Four is on theschedule.com. There you can find a links for either Kurt or Greg, depending which side of the state you live on, and get a hold of them to take care of your gutter issues. All right, so the player Michigan had to keep in the gutter, Johni Broome. I think it's fair to say they didn't keep him in the gutter. He was 8 for 11 from the field, 2 for 2 from three, which, once that started going, I'm like, this is trouble. He was a perfect 3 for 3 from the line until he missed those last two when he had one arm. Finished 25 points, 14 rebounds, 4 offensive, 2 assists, 2 turnovers, a steal and a block. He was everything you'd expect from a player of the year candidate.
Yeah. And that's and really what I said at the outset, and that my disappointment was somewhat muted because it felt like, as opposed to some other losses they've taken over the years in tournament games, that this was one where the better team won. The only reason that I'm saying that is because he's on their team.
Yeah.
And that's pretty obvious, right? National Player of the Year candidate is a pretty important part of your team. But he was great. Michigan State had no answers for him. He even hit forget the missed free. He hit a 3 with one arm.
Right.
Also grabbed a couple of important defensive rebounds with one arm. Just what else can you say? I mean, he was fantastic. And the shame of it is for Auburn is that he's nowhere near 100%. And I'm not even talking about what happened to him in this game. I'm talking about what he came into this game with. So that's what it looks like, right? That's a National Player of the Year type. And we've been lucky enough that we've had a few of those over Tom Izzo's tenure and Judd's tenure. I know what that looks like with guys like Denzel Valentine or Draymond Green or Steve Smith, Scott Skiles, Irvin Johnson. I've seen it. That's what it looks like. And he's not within miles of the gutter.
No.
And it's been really rare.
Nowhere near.
I mean, if I had the patience for it, I would go back, which I don't, but I would go back and total up what percentage of the guys we put in this category did not meet the standard to say they were out of the gutter, that they were in the gutter somehow. And I'm going to guess it had to be at least 75, 80%.
Yeah, I'd guess.
Michigan State did just a tremendous job all year long in making the other team's key guy inefficient. And it just finally ran out today. And it took one of the 2 best players in the country to do it.
All right, so then who cleans glass best? Brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. I know it's raining now, but make sure your windows are clean if you're in the Grand Rapids area. Contact the Squeegee Squad. They'll take care of it, whether it's your home, your business, maybe an apartment building, whatever it is. They can do the job, and they have a very large region, as I mentioned many times before. They're so good, they even got hired to take care of the state capitol, which is a lot of windows, and I can't even imagine how you get all those actually up on top. But anyway, contact the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. You get 15% off as a listener to the show. You just head on over to our support page, of course, at tffinots.com/support. And there you can find ways to get an estimate from Troy and his team. Again, just mentioned Final Four, 15% off. Squeegee Squad, call them today. You'll be glad you did to take care of your house, whether it's you're just power washing or cleaning the windows. All right, so it's not nearly as much fun in a loss, but I'll put this on one last time just for a little bit. just because everyone feels like they
The
need
only
to, and
thing
now I
that's
gotta.
only thing that's bringing me joy right
The
now.
only thing bringing you joy is my discomfort, and now of course I have to somehow hold the.
Self-inflicted. I didn't. You brought this up. I
I
didn't
know.
suggest it.
I'm just ask my wife. I'm not always full of good ideas. So you had Kohler and Richardson. They had 11-3. I had Cooper and Carr 7. It's a little surprising that Cooper. He made a lot of. I think the reason he wasn't in there for the rebounding this game is he really had a lot of mistakes in the offense. He had like 3 turnovers by himself, just like throwing the ball away. It's just kind
Two,
of weird.
two, two, like consecutively or very close to each
Yeah,
other.
like in the first half and
Yeah,
one the second. Yeah,
I agree. And that is something we have not spent much time talking about, but it deserves mention. Carson Cooper has improved massively in terms of his ball handling.
yeah,
And they don't ask him to do a ton of it, but Michigan State always, as opposed to some other teams, if you're the 5 man at Michigan State, you are still going to have an active role in the way the offense functions. I can't even look at you with that thing
I will take it off because I'm super hot. So it's actually I appreciate it.
on.
I can't
um,
have, I can barely see
but
everything. Too good. Yeah.
but I believe it. But he's that you know what I'm talking about. If you watch Michigan State, they frequently will run their offense where early offense gets the ball to the big at the top of the key. And then they'll run guards off of that, a lot of dribble handoffs, etc. But it still matters. And he's made big improvements, I've felt, in that area. Today, it didn't happen. He struggled
Yeah.
with it. I also don't think he gave them enough. I don't know what the minutes were. I don't have that stat, unfortunately.
I can look it
But
up real quick, probably.
um but I think that he also wasn't giving them enough in the other areas. It wasn't like he was locking down. I mean, I think they probably
No, he
had
wasn't. Yeah. He
some
had 13
thoughts.
minutes.
How much?
13.
Yeah,
Mostly
see,
first
that's
half, though.
low. That's
Yeah.
like that's like, 5 or 6 at least lower than we've been
Hmm.
seeing lately.
Yeah.
I just didn't think it was a strong game for Coop. He's had a great season, just one of those things. But yeah, because he wasn't really giving them a lot of anything in this one, uh, his minutes were down and thus his rebounding opportunities were down.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the Five Keys game brought to you by Nudge Printing. If you want to have some logo gear, you can from Tiff Notch, you can. I can't tell you how disappointed I was telling my family. I was so excited to but not be able to say the Final Four is on the schedule. So close, so close. It's going to happen sometime before
Well, it's
it'll come
happened
to an
once
end.
in the history of this podcast.
I know, but not to
For
me.
anybody anybody concerned with jinxes, don't buy into that.
No, I did and just so everyone knows, I did everything I could possibly do to reverse jinx. I started writing the mortuary, the post game analysis before the game is over, hoping that would somehow turn things around because I've done that before and then been
Uh-huh.
burned. Like that
Yeah.
Oregon game is a good example.
Yeah.
But anyway, didn't nothing I could do with this game with Broome. Can't stop it. So anyway, if you want to get this or Tiff Knot stuff, it's available. We got t-shirt stuff. Obviously, soon it will be warm enough to start wearing t-shirts on a regular basis. They got all that stuff over at our page at nudgeprinting.com/TFFINOTS. For the people who win gift card stuff, you could obviously go to Nudge Printing and get that done. But you get 20% off if you just type in Final Four as one word in checkout when you buy your stuff. You can buy some of our stuff. You can buy regular stuff from Nudge, whatever you want. It is super high quality, super comfortable. I know people are always on the live streams talking about how much they like it. Wear it for good luck, t-shirts. And again, I mean, I'm wearing this hoodie and I love their sweatshirts, and the t-shirts are a favorite of the family. Everybody wears them all the time. So anyway, head over to Nudge Printing. You'll be glad you did. So we begin with the boards. So Michigan State had an overall rebounding edge of 38-36, 11 offensive rebounds to 10 for Auburn. But because Auburn shot better, they had Michigan State had a 26%
Actually,
offensive rebounding.
it was 13-11.
13.
you
Oh,
add
of course.
in-
You know what? I probably figured that out before the game was over.
Yep.
When there's so 13-11. So they probably end up with about a little less than 30%. Auburn with a 28% offensive rebounding rate. Second chance points, as I mentioned, Michigan State had 9, Auburn with 11. Michigan State just unable to convert. I mean, there's that one possession they must have had like three and just kept just missing
Yeah.
breaking threes, whether it was Akins or someone else too. But uh, you know, didn't do enough there, I suppose you'd say. I mean, they certainly didn't stop Auburn from getting offensive rebounds as much as you would hope. And there are a number of those, kind of like you were talking about earlier, where it's like it's right there, and they just didn't quite corral
Yep.
it, or Auburn sort of
Yep.
falling out of bounds and throws and saves it. So credit to Auburn for just kind of making those work.
Yeah.
And it seems like you're often rewarded when you get those, especially those crazy ones. There's so much scrambling that there's a guy open and they made him pay.
Yeah. They made plays, right? They secured rebounds when they needed to, and Michigan State didn't do enough of it. I said in our pregame, if Michigan State did not carve out an edge in this category, it was hard to imagine them winning, and that's what we got. I mean, they
Yeah.
were clearly a lot better than they were against Ole Miss, and I don't fault, unlike the Ole Miss game, I felt Michigan State's effort and activity level and toughness were there.
Yeah.
They just got met by a team that is a little more physically mature, a lot more, and that was also playing with a lot of effort, high activity level, a lot of want to, all the cliches, but it was there. And when that happened, we got what we got, which was a game which was essentially played more or less evenly on the glass, and that wasn't going to be good enough for MSU.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Or if you don't get an edge, you got to have a big edge somewhere elsewhere, and they were just unable to.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, place where they didn't get enough of an edge was the free throw line. Again, you mentioned they needed about 20. They got their 16. They were 13-16, so the percentage was pretty good. I mean, Jeremy missed both those at Lake, which probably
Yeah.
didn't matter too much. It would have, I think, cut it to 8 or 7 or something like that. But uh, Auburn with 11 for 20, so they struggled as we expected. They put Hartwell on there a couple of times, and he managed to hit the one and sort of like praising God and pointing to the to the crowd like because he made one free throw. So again, not enough there, but and this was my concern going into that game. I was worried that with the shot blocking that they would be a little too tentative going in to try and score around the bucket to draw those fouls, and that kind of came to fruition.
I thought in the first half, Michigan State, similarly to the Ole Miss game, did not do nearly enough to put Auburn under pressure. I just didn't think they were trying to get to the rim enough. Or maybe more to the point, they were settling for a lot of jumpers and they clearly were not dialed in. Second half, the activity level was much higher, but they weren't getting enough calls. They weren't creating enough contact at the basket, and thus they didn't get the number of opportunities that they really needed to. I mean, we ended up +2 at the line. Again, you'd probably, if I had been put on the spot and said, "Tell me the number you think they got to be plus to win this game," I probably would have leaned more toward the 5-6 end of things
Mm-hmm.
rather than two. And if they'd had a 6 free throw edge, well, that's a 2-point game. So
Well,
I
and
don't think that analysis was wrong. It was that we didn't quite see it come to fruition. And again, credit to Auburn. This is a foul plagued team on the year. And it remains to be seen what happens in the national semifinal against Florida. I would be worried about that if I were Auburn playing that Florida team, because Florida has a lot of similarities to Michigan State in terms of how they play, except they shoot the three much better. But
yeah.
that in turn will force Auburn maybe to defend it a little differently, which could leave them more vulnerable to activity at the rim. Uh, for this game, at least, Auburn was able to avoid. I mean, they both teams committed a boatload of fouls in the second half when you add it up,
Yeah.
but MSU was not able to turn enough of that activity into free throw attempts in order to hang in there and find a way to win this game.
Well, and I think, it much like the game where everything was just like a little bit more one way or the other, and Michigan State has a advantage of some sort, whether on a play, the fouling. I mean, they had a couple more fouls. Because Auburn was on the verge of having some serious foul trouble with a lot of their guards, but they never
Yeah.
quite got enough of them. in order to put enough pressure on them to really cause some substitution
It's a
pattern
good
problems
point.
for Auburn. Right? I mean,
It's a
they
good point. When it happened, it was late enough in the game that they could manage it.
well, yeah, they had a couple guys with three, and they bring back, and they still couldn't get that fourth. And anyway, it's just one of those things where
Well,
just
I think they eventually, didn't they eventually get four on, what was it?
Johnson, I think maybe.
No, no.
Or
No, I'm wrong. Jones and Kelly both ended the game with three. You're right.
yeah,
It just, yeah, it came a little bit too late because that would have been, and we did talk about that would be, I know I was thinking Broome would be the ideal guy, and
right,
that didn't
obviously,
happen.
yeah,
That didn't happen. But if they'd been able to get to that just a shade earlier with two guards, one they can handle. But if you would put a second perimeter guy in trouble, that's where Auburn's depth would have started to really get tested.
right.
But it didn't happen.
Third key of the game was transition, and this one, Michigan State had a little edge of. So from a turnover standpoint, they only had 9 turnovers, so pretty good job for Michigan State actually,
Yes.
considering that's what we were worried about. Auburn was 6, and so
Yeah.
points off turnovers
Back to
11.
normal.
Yeah, 11-6 edge for Auburn, not huge. Fast break points, an edge to Michigan State 9-7. I was a little surprised, and I didn't feel like Michigan State pushed the ball as much as they could have. I mean, there was that one instance with Jeremy did, and then I think he ended up drawing a foul or something like that. But I, I think they could have gotten more there. And to your point, we're talking a couple episodes ago, maybe when you're talking about Jeremy, and he is going to drive people totally insane in the Big Ten with his ability to get people to foul him when he's running.
Yep.
Whether changing speed,
Did
suddenly
it
slowing
did it
down.
in
It's
this
like
game. Did it in
it's
this
yeah,
game.
it's like the guy who's you're tailgating him, and he's just going to hit the brakes and force you to run into the back of him. And
That is a skill when you
yeah,
can seek contact and find ways to put the opposition in awkward positions where they end up fouling you, and especially they end up fouling you 50 feet, 60 feet, 70 feet from the basket.
right.
Yeah, that never mind at the rim. I A couple things on this. One, 9 points is a little bit short of where I thought they needed to be.
Hmm.
We had said double digits. You know, privately, I was hoping for maybe 13, 14, because I had seen enough instances in the Michigan game of looseness from Auburn that I thought maybe we can get some chances here. And they just didn't get enough of them. Part of that, I'll go to the second point where I completely agree with you. I thought Jeremy was pretty good, as he almost always is, in pushing the ball. I did not think this was a good game in that respect from Trey Holloman.
Yeah, Trey had a
I
rough
did
game in
not
general.
think when you're talking about those possessions, if you, God help you, if you went back and watched that game and you're talking about those possessions where Michigan State just wasn't pushing it, they were walking it up kind of, or a slow jog. I'm going to bet you 75% of those were Trey Holloman possessions where
Hmm.
he was at the
Yep.
point. Now, Trey's made great strides in that area. This is not any kind of holistic knock on him at all. But that is something I would like to see. It's an area where I think he can improve for next season, is taking a cue from Jeremy, and instead of pushing tempo 70% of the time, 75% of the time, do it somewhere closer to 100.
Yeah.
I think he just at times just kind of dials it back a little bit. Nowhere near, like, we're not talking AJ Hogarth issues here. Don't get me
Right. Right.
wrong.
Right.
But in this game, yeah, I noticed it too.
I wonder too. There, I don't remember exactly what the score was. I'd have to look back. I don't really have any interest in doing that, but I think it was like 15-8. It was kind of early-ish in that, or maybe early mid in that big, huge 17-0 run by Auburn in the first half. And there was a lob to Carr that was there, and then Trey from half court, passing, it
Yep.
just went about a foot over Carr's
Yep.
head. Just, I mean, pretty good pass, just didn't quite get it. And I don't know if that just spooked him, but I feel like after that he just really didn't try and do too much on the break. And
Yep.
I don't
I,
know. I mean
I actually
and
don't
that would have
even
been a huge turning point too had they been able to convert on that. I mean this is again that point, like a couple inches different, and that's a dunk, and now we have a momentum change, and Michigan State's
Izzo
not
says it, Izzo says it all the time. Those dunks aren't worth 2 points, and he's
yeah
right.
right. Hmm.
Um, That one, I'd have to go back, and I'm with you. I don't have any interest in doing it, but I felt like it wasn't so much Trey went high with it as the timing of the pass was just a
Mhm.
shade off. It
Yeah.
felt like Cohen, it needed to be there a beat earlier than it was.
Yeah.
Like Cohen went by it as
Yeah. I think
opposed
so.
to, oh, it's 5 feet above Cohen's hands. I don't think it was that. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that might be the case. But if it is, you can't let that happen. You can't let a play that didn't work result in you not even trying to do the things that we all know are so important to this team.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how many points Trey had, but he had a couple free throws. I don't think he had 2 points, just
It
those
was
two
not
free
a
throws.
yeah,
It was a
it was not
rough
a
game for him.
not a great game, but the good news for him is he's got another go around.
That's right. All right, the fourth key of the game is the most obvious of all of them, the first half. So Michigan State had struggled
Yeah.
coming out of the first half, all three games in the NCAA tournament, and this made the fourth, and that 17-0 run was the difference in the game. They just never could quite come back from that.
Yep.
They were up 8-6, then it was 23-8 before they kind of got rolling again. And just that was the game right there. And I don't know exactly how you. Well, I guess there's not a way to fix it because it's already done, and you've got a new season. So it was just weird because it was not really a problem for most of the season. Like I
Right.
know we've had seasons before where it's like, yeah, they're just kind of. I feel like the Hogard, Walker, Mahal years. There were many slow starts that they could never really overcome later on, but this team seemed to manage to get over it, and they even kind of made a push, got back to five. But again, when you're always playing uphill, it's especially against
Well,
great teams,
we
tough.
we said it, and I think it ended up being the truth.
Yep,
The danger in continuing to do this is that eventually you run into a team that's just good enough to not let you get back into the game, back over the hump. I don't think Michigan State was really out of the game ever because Auburn's biggest lead, I think, after that 23-8, I believe their biggest lead after that was only 12.
hmm
But a lot of the game was played in that 8 to 10 range,
yep,
a lot of it. And that's that nether region where you're not out of it, but you're also not really, they're able to play without the kind of game pressure you want them under because they're
exactly.
up multiple possessions. And there were only those brief couple of periods where MSU got it to five. I mean, the fact that the game ended up six is frankly slightly flattering to MSU
Yeah,
in terms of where the game was played at most of the way. Um, but I think that's what we were concerned about is what ended up happening. You ran into a team that was good enough that they weren't gonna give you the opportunity to get over the hump once you
yeah.
gave them that big lead.
I feel like the line was like
MSU
six
start
and a
was
half.
fine. As you said, they were up 8-6. So it wasn't, these previous tournament games, it's been bad from the tip.
Yeah, like 12-2 or 12-4,
Yeah.
and then yeah,
And
right.
it wasn't that way. They got to the first, they got to the under 16 timeout fine. It was at the point it was the next segment. It was the under 12 timeout that they were way down. And I would submit again, although anytime you're giving up 23 points in the first 10 minutes, you're not playing great defense,
Right.
but Michigan State's offense was just abysmal.
Yeah.
That was the period of the game where you just felt like they can't hit a shot because that it was during that segment that I know at least once, maybe twice, where they had multiple offensive rebounds, would have kickouts for open jumpers and couldn't hit a one of them.
Yeah.
There was a play in there where Cohen Carr missed one at the rim. I mean, it was just weird, just not able to get shots to drop.
I think Jackson had like a 3-footer that he shot 2 feet. It was
He
like he
he did
airballed it
on
from
a
three
on
feet away.
a post up fadeaway. Yep, one of the two shots he missed.
Right. Yeah. He's otherwise really good. All right. So the fifth and final key to the game was guarding the arc. As I mentioned, that was clearly the strategy for Michigan State with allowing Broome to kind of get working. Once they switched Sapala on him, it was he didn't get quite as much done, at least in the post. But by that point, the game was a little bit out of hand too. And so I mean, Michigan State did a great job. 7 for 25 for 3 for Auburn. They actually,
Yep.
without Broome's 2, 27% shooter. I mean, he just had a great game. they're 5 for 23. That's well below their average. 28.
Yep.
That's like 25%. So great job by Michigan State. Obviously not enough. And then of course on the other way, they weren't able to hit much. Just they were 7 for 23, which again, as you said, that's a little flattering because Akins hit a couple late that were kind of meaningless to get the lead down to 7 or something. But I don't know, not enough.
Um, they did the job here defensively.
Yeah.
And they did the job offensively too. If you told me before the game, well, they're going to have 7 threes and they're going to shoot 30%, I would not have felt that would have ruled them out. Did both ways. The 3-point shooting, offensively and defensively, in the end, was not a determinative factor. It's not why they lost this game. They lost this game because they didn't have an edge in the areas they've had an edge in pretty much all year. That's why. So I give them credit for the way they guarded the arc. I do think, honest to God, I think that the defensive game plan I can't take issue with. Yeah, Auburn shot 43% overall from the floor, but that's below what they shoot on the year. And it took a great game from Broome to get them there.
Yeah.
So I do not fault the way Michigan State played defensively. I don't fault the scheme, and give or take some stuff early in the game with Broome in the post, I don't fault the execution.
Yeah. And I think they
did
adjusted to
enough
that.
there. They did
They
enough
adjusted
there.
to that. Yeah, they did adjust with the Broome, and they didn't limit him because then he started scoring through the slips through the screens.
Yeah,
and stuff, but
he had that period. I guess it was earlier in the second half where
yeah,
he had 2 or 3 slip screens in the middle of the floor. And that was good stuff. That was good stuff to run. And by the way, good execution because
yeah,
it took good. I remember there was one Baker Mazzara made just a great pass to find him on one of
yeah,
those slips. So Auburn executed really well on those. But by and large, I'm happy with the way MSU defended the 3. Let's put it this way. If Auburn had been able to shoot something close to what they normally do, this one would have been a blowout.
yeah.
The fact that it was as competitive as it was is down in part to the fact that MSU did do that. They lived up to their billing as an elite perimeter defense.
Yeah, just someone posted here, the Akins Holloman fears combined with 7 for 31, but only got 7 because, Akins hit those shots late.
Throw Jace in there.
Yeah,
Jace was 4 for 13.
Jace was bad too. Yeah, I mean,
And he was, and
11
by
for
the
44.
way, 1 for 9 in the second half.
Yeah.
He was 3 for 4 in the first half. That was, and I'm not Jace Richardson. I was having this discussion
He's terrible.
with somebody earlier
Yeah,
today.
right.
He has rapidly climbed the charts of my favorite players I've ever seen at MSU. And I'm talking about the totality of what he is, not even just as a player. We interviewed him months and months ago, and he was great. He was so impressive. You could tell how sharp he was. I've heard that he has a 3.9 GPA. I know he speaks multiple languages fluently. You watch him being interviewed, and you feel like you're listening to a 29-year-old instead of an 18 or 19-year-old, however old he is right now.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a little thing the other day that just, it shouldn't have an impact, but it really did. It knocked me out. MSU's pregame, maybe it was their post, it must have been their post-game press conference after the Ole Miss win. And Jace was looking at the dais. He was on the far right, so he was the last guy to get up because they departed going past Izzo. And I don't even remember who the other 2 guys were. And they all got up out of their chairs. It was time for the players to leave the dais. And the first 2 guys wasn't bad, but they got up, pulled their chairs out to get up, and then didn't fully move them all the way under. Jace Richardson put his chair firmly under and moved the other 2 as he walked past it. It's a tiny little thing. And I understand people saying, laughing at that, saying, what are you talking about? It evidences a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Tells you something about how someone's been raised, certainly, but it also, I don't want to attribute it all to that because it's him.
Yeah.
And
Right.
we'll have plenty of time to talk about this over the weeks to come. I'm prepared to make the argument that Tom Izzo has never had a better freshman than Jace Richardson. He's had some guys who scored more points, not many, but a few. But I don't think he's ever had a more efficient freshman. There might even be an argument he's never had a more efficient player than Jace Richardson was offensively this season. And then you add in what he did defensively and, frankly, as a rebounder at the guard
Yeah.
position. And holy hell, did he have a year. Selfish, I mean, again, we'll have a lot of time to get into this. Selfishly, I'm sure everybody listening to this would love nothing more than a second season in East Lansing from Jace Richardson. If that does not happen, and it very well might not, zero regrets, because that kid gave you beyond what any reasonable expectation could have been. Today, yeah. I think what happened is the first half, he was the only thing they had going. He was the only reason they were really still in touch.
Yeah, he and Jackson.
Offensive production.
Right.
Well, yeah. But first, Jackson got a lot done in the second half. I guess Jax had...
He had that three, or
he had two threes.
Five,
he had 6 points, I think, at halftime. So he was part of it. But Jace was the guy, really, who I felt was giving you some faith that, all right, maybe they got a second gear. And then I thought they talked to him at halftime, and he's like, we've got to be more aggressive. And I think he was. Unfortunately, Auburn really defended him well. I don't think he had a single clean look in that second half. And he struggled. He was not able to make things happen the way we're used to seeing. To his defense, as I say, I thought Auburn guarded him exceptionally well. Denver Jones, very good individual defender, was on him a lot. And, it wasn't like he was missing repeated wide open jumpers.
Yeah,
they were tough shots. He was one of the guys that I felt got affected by their length.
Mm-hmm.
He had the one fadeaway rejected by their center in the middle of the lane. He's not used to that happening. That had a lot to do with it. It wasn't, Jace choked. Not at all. Auburn really guarded him well, and he just didn't have an answer for it. If he does return to Michigan State, I think this game would probably end up being a driver for him, because he can look back at it and say, all right, now I've seen what it's like at the true highest level. I got to have more counters for this. I got to figure out ways that I can respond to that. He could also opt to develop that in the NBA, and I wouldn't have a bit of bad feeling about that, because he's given them everything he had. He's been an incredible kid, incredible player. Second half tonight was not his night. And truthfully, to get over the hump in this game, they probably needed Jace to be super Jace.
Yeah.
They needed somebody. Jax did a great job, gave him about as much production as you could have ever hoped for. But they needed somebody else to be able, not stylistically, but just in terms of impact on the game, to counter what Auburn had with Broome.
Yeah, they needed Trey to hit 3 or 4 from 3, or get in the, score in the lane, or Jaden do the same thing, and just they didn't get that.
But Jace, but the difference there is, yes, those guys can do it, but Jace is the guy that you've come to expect it from.
Sure, yeah.
As he's emerged as their best player, their best offensive player. And he just wasn't quite able to rise to that occasion in the second half. And that was probably part of it too.
Yeah, I guess the only other player we didn't talk about who had a really good game was Frankie Fiddler. I mean, he's come around really well. Offensively, he was great. Hit that 3 too. He had, drove the lane, free throws, played good defense. You'd love to see him play another year. Obviously, he won't be back next year, but he was, for a guy who came in with high expectations, and from a scoring standpoint and from free throw standpoint, and then really just kind of had a really struggle trying to get into the flow of things during the middle of the season, to just kind of stick at it and be very impactful at the end of the season. It was quite credit to him, and it was a good game from him. I think he just It's funny because as far as when you go for these mid majors and these transfer portals, and everyone's always saying, "Oh, you just need to go to the portal, get so and so." You just don't know what you're going to get. I mean, you get there was every reason to be optimistic about him being like a great guy. But I think that you look at Wisconsin, they really wanted Frankie Fiddler, couldn't get him, and ended up with John Tange, right?
Hmm.
So and you'd say, well, obviously Wisconsin won the lottery, but you just never know. And so it's again, nothing against Freddie because he was really great, or Frankie. But anyway, so
He
I just want to mention him too.
No, it's good you did because I think and you mentioned Zapala, I think actually had a pretty decent game
Yeah,
as well. We don't know his status. For those who don't know, I have heard that they are going to pursue a waiver due to one of the years he had at Utah State to see if he can get another year of eligibility. We'll see what happens there. So he may or may not be done. The other two guys are done. Um, I think all three guys can feel good about the way they closed their careers, if that's what it comes down to. I mean, Jaden was not brilliant offensively for the full 40 minutes, but the way he played, and I don't even just mean the shots he hit, the way he was playing defensively, the effort he was giving, that was a kid who was giving you everything he had.
yeah. He
And
put him in
and
the
Frank,
Elite Eight. I mean, he
yep,
helped him beat Mississippi. Worked for
and
him. Yeah.
Frankie, I think was playing his best all around basketball right now.
Yep.
Two consecutive games that he made plays with um, fake passes.
Oh,
He did it
yes.
in this one where he faked kicking it to Jaden to give himself enough room to have an open three, and it worked, and he hit it. You saw in those plays, those moments, evidence of how smart he is as a basketball player. Then you look at the way he competed. I mean, he had 5 rebounds in this game, too, to go with nine
Yeah.
points. He very definitely had an impact. And that was not unusual. He was good, I think, in all 4 tournament games. He stepped up and delivered. He didn't play the role and he wasn't the scorer that I mean, look, I'll remind everybody in case you've forgotten. I picked him to be Michigan State's leading scorer this season.
Yeah.
That obviously did not come close to happening. What I did not see though is I wondered, is he going to struggle with the transition defensively? Is he going to be able to be an effective rebounder at this level? He had been playing for Omaha. And I think in the end, he became a better defender than I thought he could be. And he showed you why he was a good rebounder. Nights like this against that
Yeah.
team, 5 rebounds. I think the other thing too, and you hear the coaching staff and his teammates talk about it, that you got to give him a ton of credit for is most guys come in his situation from the portal. And look, make no mistake, he was expected to be a starter, and he was early on, and it was clearly not working out. And as time went on, it became obvious it wouldn't have even just been, well, Frankie's not playing well enough to justify that. It said, hey, we got this guy, Jace Richardson, who's
Yeah.
coming on. We got to find more minutes for him, right? So it would have been tension no matter what. But he handled it seemingly, from as much as I know, about as well as you possibly could. He was
Yeah.
interviewed at some point during the tournament run, and or maybe it might have even been after the Michigan game at Breslin. And he was asked the question, would you, if you had it to do all over again, would you? And he said something to the effect of, without a doubt. He was like, what more could I have asked for? I got to win a championship. I got to make friends I'm going to have for life. He ends up also in an Elite Eight. One was
Yeah.
part of 3 tournament wins. I mean, that's a hell of a thing. Individually, it was not the kind of season he'd hoped for. You know, the shame of it is, and this is the problem at a place like Michigan State to some extent. I think it's fair to say that the 1 year guy thing is not a perfect fit for what Tom Izzo does. That's
Yep.
not to say that you can't be good. Jace Richardson's proof of that as a 1st year guy. But even when he's been in the transfer game, Joey Hauser took him 2 years, really,
Hmm.
Three, if you count the year he sat out
Right.
before he really got. Tyson Walker took
2 years.
until his second year
Yep.
to really come around fully. I look at the way Frankie Fiddler's playing right now, and can you imagine the optimism we would have if he were coming back for another year?
Yeah.
Because you feel like, hey, he's figured it out, and he's the shots have got to drop better for him next year than they did this year. And in fact, they were. He hit that three today.
Hmm. Yep.
He's hit some others of late.
Yeah.
So it's just a shame that you're not going to get an extra year out of him. And then before we leave this, I do want to return to Jaden, um, another guy that you could say as an individual, maybe not the year that he would have expected or wanted. The shot never fully came around. We know what kind of shooter he is because we've seen him do it in previous seasons. It was a struggle all year long to find any consistency with that. But he made the all defense team in the league. And I think he made the transition as a player that I'd been hoping for the 3 full years before that, in that he finally became an effective downhill player.
Hmm. Yeah.
His ability to convert tough shots at the rim was really, really important to this team. And that was something that I knew he had the potential for, but we didn't see. I mean, you may remember this. I can't remember what his total free throw attempts were last season, but it was ridiculously
Yeah.
low.
40 or something,
Oh,
maybe
it might have
30 or
even
something.
not even been that much.
Yeah. 30. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have it in front of me where he ended up, but I know he shot way more this season. And that was reflective of the change that he was able to make in his game. So hats off to him for that. I think, again, as I said a few minutes ago, the end of this game was emblematic of who Jaden Akins is as a player because he never stopped playing till the
Yeah.
final whistle hit. Even 4 seconds left, he's trying to come up with a steal. So hats off to him. I'm going to have really fond memories of him and his Michigan State career as well.
Yeah.
And he did
Big
some
Ten,
things. He reached a Sweet 16. He reached an Elite Eight. He
Big
won
Ten
he's a
title.
Big Ten champion.
Yeah.
So some good stuff on his
He hung a
resume.
banner, right?
Yep,
Hung a banner.
absolutely.
Uh, so there are a number of questions on the chat, which we're going to get to a lot of these now that the season's over. We always have a wrap up for Michigan State for the season. We'll talk about the Big Ten. It's roster season, as we talk about, as far as the
Well, that'll
portal
be going
goes.
on for weeks and
That's gonna be going for
months.
a while. I think when it comes to Michigan State, just briefly, it's probably worth just addressing. We've talked about it before when it comes to players, whether going to the NBA or not. And Jace is obviously Jason, probably Cone Carr too, to some extent, is the possibility. I think the staff they'll go. This player's going to go for evaluation. They're going to get ideas of what they, where they'll land, I suppose, or it's expectations. They have all got agents now, so it's actually probably a little bit cleaner the whole process. But I think they're going to make decisions that are in their best interest, whatever they might be. And I think this Michigan State staff is usually supportive of that. There's just no way for us to, I mean, you could throw a percentage, but it doesn't mean anything right now. It's like a
No,
60-40 or something like that.
no, and,
It's
and
either going to
I'm
be, it's
and
either
I'm
zero or 100, right? That's all that really matters. And
well,
we can't know.
and I'm going to say this and feel very confident in what I'm saying. First with Cohen Carr, I can't speak to that definitively, of course, because you're right. I would be surprised,
Mm-hmm.
maybe very surprised, to see him move on. And the primary reason for that is it's two ends of the equation. One is there's still some significant improvement that needs to occur. And I'm not one of these guys who's like, oh, he's not ready for the NBA. That's got nothing to do with anything. But in his case, it's very clear to see there's the potential to be a pro, but his game still has some real developing to do.
Yeah.
And so the question becomes, are you better off doing that in this environment, or are you better off doing that in the G League?
Right.
and you would think somebody would stick him. Well, gee, I don't think he'd get drafted. I guess I'd be very surprised by that. But um, I just think the equation there seems to be too obvious that the right move for him is another year of development in East Lansing. And if he makes the strides, you've heard Izzo talk about this in recent days. He said if he keeps going the way he's going, he's not just going to be a good player, he's going to be a star. And I think that's
Yeah.
possible for next year. I really do. I mean, I don't know why any Michigan State fan would think it wasn't possible. When you look at the strides he's made and the tools that he has to work with, good God.
Yeah.
With the other thing I was going to say though is you're going to hear things said about Jace Richardson in the days to come. I'm telling you, I firmly believe there is nobody who's going to have that dialed in outside of Jace Richardson, his parents, and Tom Izzo.
Yeah.
That's it. So don't believe any in either direction. I'm saying if somebody comes running to Twitter and says, "Oh, Jace is coming back," don't buy into that.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm confident of, well, two things. One thing I'm confident of is nobody knows except those people I mentioned. The second thing I'm confident of is in this case, I don't believe there is a wrong decision. Because normally with freshmen, what you worry about, or what I would worry about, I guess, is that 18 or 19-year-old emotionally mature enough to handle it? And
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, this kid, I think if you told people other than just looking at him that he was 30, you'd buy it. Well, that's not an issue. Then he's got a parent who's been through it, who knows what
Right.
that life is like. There's no mistake possible here. There just isn't. And if the decision is that it makes sense for him to go, that that's what they believe, thanks for giving us a great year, Jace, because that's what he would be doing. I would hate to see anybody react even remotely negatively to that. And if we're lucky enough as Michigan State fans that he decides he's better off doing one more year in East Lansing, then count us lucky.
Yeah. Right. And I think, we've talked to Jordan Scott and Cam Ward, who are incoming freshmen next year. I think they're going to be some fantastic players. And so this is a team that is going to, we'll go through the roster. We're going to go through, what holes the state has. But to your point, I mean, right now, no one has any idea what the roster are in lots of teams. I mean, look at, I think Indiana has no players right now or something like that. Everybody's entered the portal.
Illinois is losing everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a sickening time in some respects for most programs. I feel bad. I mean, I think it's easy. I don't think I recognize how bad it is for lots of places to just have these total, just complete destructions of teams. I feel like, even with free agency in baseball, it's not like this. It's not like the entire roster.
But that's the point.
Yeah.
No other sport is their annual free agency for everybody.
Yeah.
So
anyway, this won't last much longer. I don't know what the tipping point is. We'll get it. We'll probably try and get a couple people on this summer to talk about that as well.
I would say this. For anybody who's a satellite radio subscriber, it was yesterday, and I believe I was listening to a replay. Whatever Sirius XM calls the college sports station on there has a show by Coach K. And he had our friend of the podcast, Jay Billis, on. Talking about, it was very recently, it was within the last week that the episode was recorded. And Jay was talking about all of these things that are flying around: the house settlement, revenue sharing, on and on and on. Things we've talked about with him, but in an updated fashion. I would highly, highly recommend, if you have an interest in any of those subjects, as I think at least some of you do, to see if you can hunt that episode down if you are a satellite subscriber, maybe on their app, and take a listen to it, because I heard the vast majority of it. I came in a little late, and but I probably heard about a half hour's worth, and it was fantastic. It was all the same kind of themes that we've talked about on our podcast with him, but just as I say, updated, and it was really, really interesting listening. But yeah, to bring it back around to Michigan State, We don't know for sure what's going to happen. I mean, the on paper, they've got what? They have 13 scholarship players.
I
Is
think
that
so.
right?
Yeah, probably.
Uh,
How
let me
many do they have
think.
now? They've thir-
No, they had 12. They had 12, right?
right.
Because the two freshmen both didn't play much. One of them redshirted, and Book was part of the 10-man rotation. So I believe that. Oh no, and Norman, they had 13. That's right.
Yeah.
So they would, on paper, have at least 10 guys coming back. But I'm
Who
going to
knows?
bet that even if you take Jace Richardson out of it, there will be at least a little change in the roster. There's a couple of guys, we don't have to get into it today, but there are a couple of guys that you could look at and say fairly obviously, yeah, they would seem to be a candidate to move on. MSU is adding, as you said, two freshmen. So what does that mean for them in the portal? I think what it means is going to be very, very much dependent, big surprise, on who's back,
It's shocking.
you know?
Shocking news. Breaking news
Um,
there.
but I would say this, if you're pining for Michigan State to get into the bidding wars where you see these guys, we're now seriously hearing people, the rumor, can't verify it, but the rumor is the Dent kid that we saw for New Mexico who just committed to UCLA is getting like somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 mil. If you're waiting for Michigan State to get involved in those, I think you're going to be waiting a while.
Yeah.
Whatever they decide to add, I'm going to be surprised if it's that. I would say bet on similar kinds of additions to what they had this year. Pieces, Frankie Fiddler was a guy who was wanted, but he wasn't
Yeah.
the crazy, crazy, crazy money from what I understand. And Zapala obviously was not a hotly contested one. If they add people, they're gonna look for guys who fit this culture. And boy, if you needed any more proof than this season as to how important that is and how well it can work, this season was it.
Yeah.
So we'll
Uh,
see.
All right. So I'd recommend if you have not yet subscribed to the show, make sure you do, whether it's on YouTube or on your podcast player. Make sure you hit notification likes buttons, those sorts of things. Make sure you don't miss anymore. We're going to be there back quite a bit this season. We usually try and put about one a week throughout the off season until we get to the Big Ten previews, which it's, again, there are 18 of those. It does take about a couple months to get through. So we'll be here. We're going to take a little bit of break here for a bit, but we'll get back with a season recap and then talk about the Big Ten, like I said. So check us out. Make sure you stick around. Check out our sponsors and all the great people who support the show. And thanks again to all of you who listen, who tune in up all the time. We really appreciate that. It's been fun. It's a lot of work, but you make it worthwhile, make it fun. So I guess then for the last time this season, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.